Broadcasting the information the mainstream media won't touch. This is The Richie Allen Show in association with DavidIke.com.
My first guest is no stranger to you. He's a former NSA employee and US naval officer. He is a terrific investigative journalist. I am going to put his website details on social media soon, so you'll know where to follow him. You should be following him already. We often see him as a foreign policy correspondent for RT, for Press TV, and Infowars, and lots more besides. He is an author, and a successful author. And one of the things I want to talk to him about is the new book, Unmasking ISIS: The Shocking Truth, which is written, which has been co-written with with George Washington's blog. Let's welcome to the program. Thrilled to have him back, Wayne Madsen. Wayne, welcome back. How are you?
Hi, good to be with you.
Always good to have you on, Wayne, and congratulations on Unmasking ISIS: The Shocking Truth. Terrific book, and never more important than now.
Well, you know, and it's rather timely because of the controversy now surrounding the still classified 28 pages from the Congressional Joint Intelligence Report on the failures of 9/11. We used to be kind of lone wolves and calling for the release of the 28 pages, but now it's gotten the attention of CBS 60 Minutes. The subject was featured on Meet the Press on NBC yesterday, and so the Obama administration is under immense pressure to release these 28 pages, no matter what countries who have been considered allies of the United States, how that relationship may suffer. Chiefly Saudi Arabia, but people I know who have actually seen the 28 pages have told me that there's a couple of other countries involved if one looks at the footnoted information contained within those 28 pages.
Wayne, we know that members of Congress have access to these redacted pages. So I know that you've got a pretty good idea, because of your own contacts, as to what is exactly in these pages. What exactly do these 28 pages say, Wayne? What's in there? What's the big information, the explosive information there?
Well, we have actually now some other sources. Some members of the 9/11 Commission, which should not be confused with the Joint Inquiry. There were two different reports. The 9/11 Commission was a quote-unquote blue ribbon panel chaired by former New Jersey Governor Tom Kean and former Representative and House Intelligence Committee Chairman Lee Hamilton. That's a separate report. That's the one that was issued that many people criticized because it really didn't get to the bottom of 9/11. The other one is the report by the Senate and House Intelligence Committees, and that's the one that contains the 28 pages. However, John Lehman, former Navy Secretary, who was a member of the 9/11 Commission under Kean and Hamilton, has stated that apparently they saw some of the information, or they saw this report too, in their doing their work for the 9/11 Commission, and that they, in this case, Secretary Lehman claims that names are, unforgettable names are mentioned in the 28 pages. Now, based on that and what I've heard from people who've seen the report, I would say that Saudi Prince Bandar, who was the ambassador of Saudi Arabia in Washington on 9/11, friends of the Bush family, went to the White House like within 48 hours of the attack and was smoking cigars with George W. Bush. He's named. His wife is named. Members of the Saudi government are named. And quite possibly the current king of Saudi Arabia, King Salman, is named.
Now, Wayne, can I just jump in there? Do we think named in terms of named as individuals who provided material support for the attacks?
Yes. That's why they're named. They're material support, money, logistics, and that type of support for not only the alleged hijackers. I would note that former Senator Bob Graham, who was the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, who's been calling for the release of these 28 pages, is no longer calling them the 19 Saudi hijackers. He's calling them the 19 Saudi individuals. Now, I think if people, looking at the language used, hearing the language used, possibly the release of the 28 pages may also affect the story we were all told about hijackers and whatnot. There may be just a lot more to this.
It's brilliant, Wayne. And as you said, the timing is extraordinary, because Amnesty International and several human rights groups have said that among the debris in parts of Yemen that have been bombed by the Saudi Arabians, we know that the Brits have supplied weaponry, and not only weaponry, but tactical intelligence to the Saudis to show them how to best use these weapons against innocent Yemenis. But we know that, parts of munitions made in the United States at Lockheed Martin and elsewhere are turning up as well. There isn't a more heinous regime on planet Earth than the Saudi regime. Things are starting to get really interesting, Wayne. And even more so, reading your book Unmasking ISIS, which you co-wrote with George Washington's blog, with an afterword from John Paul Leonard, it's absolutely brilliant in terms of the detailed analysis as to how this group of crazy jihadists were formed, why it was a Gladio type project, why it's serving 2, 3, 4 maybe purposes. One being fighting the Russians, promoting the Greater Israel Project. What do you think, Wayne? What are we now? We're in March. We're late March now, or we're late April, 25th of April. What are we? 5-6 years since the beginning. 5 years since the beginning of the so-called civil war in Saudi Arabia. I believe, Wayne, that more and more people who ordinarily wouldn't listen to or wouldn't read the Wayne Madsen report, which I think everybody should read, it's fantastic, or listen to a program like this, more and more of them are becoming aware now that these groups like ISIS don't just turn up out of the blue or out of thin air. More people are alive and aware of it now, Wayne, than ever, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's ironic that now we have a so-called corporate or mainstream media all of a sudden looking at the 28 pages when, a few years ago you couldn't get anyone interested in it. You'd be hit with the charge of being a conspiracy theorist. You called for the release of these 28 pages. So now, I guess a lot of organizations have joined the conspiracy ranks. NBC News, CBS 60 Minutes, the Washington Post, and New York Times, all of which have been carrying stories about the 28 pages.
Can I ask you a question, Wayne? Can I ask you a question on that? Sorry for interrupting you. Why are they covering it, Wayne? Because I'm always suspicious of these organizations, because we know ultimately they're controlled. Is it because they want to try and control the narrative in some way or other?
I'm not. Why? Yes. Why now? A lot of people are saying why is this coming out now? I understand from people I talk to here in D.C. that there's a lot of problems right now between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia, chiefly having to do with the Saudi attempt with the Israelis to derail the nuclear agreement with Iran and to derail the United States' intention to allow Iran to come back into the international financial system. So the Saudis have made it quite clear that they're not happy with that policy, and the Israelis have made it quite clear. And also, we have these continual Saudi war crimes in Yemen. That has really muddied the water. The price of oil, which has the Saudis have basically been responsible for this, overproduction and the reduction in the price of oil. It's going up a little bit, but that really has hurt states like Texas and the Dakotas here in the United States. So there is a lot of animosity on many levels now between the Saudis and the U.S. And it was, of course, that when Obama decided to visit Saudi Arabia on his recent trip first, and he was snubbed by the Saudi king. They sent a low-level prince to meet Air Force One, even though the king had met all the other Arab potentates that came into the summit. And then Obama basically is kowtowing to the Saudi regime instead of, by being snubbed at the airport, he probably should have. A lot of people say he should have gotten back on Air Force One and said, "Wheels up, we're going directly to London. We're going to bypass Saudi Arabia." But that did not happen. So a lot of people are questioning Obama's rose-colored glasses and looking at Saudi Arabia. Now, he's not promised to release the 28 pages. What he told Senator Graham through a low-level White House official is that we will take a look in the next 60 days at the 28 pages, and we'll determine whether to release it or not. So it's not a done deal that we're going to ever see those 28 pages. We don't know what the Saudis threatened them with in Riyadh, but it's clear that the Saudis still, through their lobbying effort in Washington, still have a lot of say in what goes on with not only administration. I'm happy to see that some in Congress of both parties are now signing on to the legislation that not only lifts sovereign immunity for Saudi Arabia, which would allow the families of the victims to sue them, but also, to release the 28 pages, which is going to be exculpatory evidence in any lawsuit brought against the government of Saudi Arabia.
I'll tell you what, Wayne, there's a couple of very interesting subplots there, my friend. One of them, obviously, is whether US citizens could find themselves in a position where they would be able to sue the Saudi Arabian government. You also mentioned the possibility that the Saudis may have threatened Obama. I believe that if the Saudis were involved in the September 11th attacks, I believe they would have had a lot of help, of course, from some elements, some of the darker state elements of the United States, some of the intelligence agencies.
Oh, absolutely.
No doubt about it. And of course, that may very well have been, part of the threat maybe made to Obama. But I tell you this way, and what's really interesting about this is there are a number of credible independent media reporters. And I'm talking to one now, by the way. Go to WayneMadsenReport.com, folks. A number of credible people, Wayne, they're saying that the Israelis are very nervous watching this explosion or seeming explosion of bad feeling between the United States and Saudi Arabia, because there are a lot of people who believe that the Israelis had their fingerprints on what happened on 9/11 as well, or at least the Mossad. How do you read that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, because you look at the role of the 19 or 15 Saudi individuals, and there were 4 others, Ada, the Egyptian, and a couple from the United Arab Emirates, and I believe one Yemeni. But you look at the months, year before 9/11, where some of these individuals, who I believe were intelligence assets and not jihadists, the trade craft they employed were nothing like a jihadist. They were more like an agent, and low-level agents, not great, Ada definitely was the ringleader. He practiced some real intelligence trade craft, but these guys were sloppy like a lot of spies are. They were never seen in mosques. They were seen in strip clubs, bars, getting drunk, and they were living in close proximity to several known Israeli Mossad agents who were basically doubling up as art students, selling art door to door, and movers and people like that. So when you look at that relationship, and then you go to a wider expanse and look at the Israeli relationship generally with Saudi Arabia, and these countries have never been opposed to one another. They've basically been providing cover. There's ties between their two intelligence services, mostly aimed at Iran. Now we saw that the Israelis signed off on Saudi Arabia being allowed by Egypt to take possession of 2 strategic islands in the Strait of Tiran, which is at the southern end of the Gulf of Aqaba, leading into the Red Sea. And you can see this axis between Saudi Arabia and Israel. It's an old alliance.
It's an old alliance, Wayne. Folks, Wayne Madsen is on the line. We've got Wayne for another 10 minutes, more or less, just about 10 minutes. Wayne's got other engagements. I want you to check Wayne's website. I know you know it, but I'm going to tell you again. It's WayneMadsenReport.com. This is a terrific investigative journalist, folks. And like I said, he's worked at the NSA, he's worked in intelligence. His books are terrific. His new book is Unmasking ISIS, The Shocking Truth, which is fantastic. It really is terrific. I can endorse it, and I do that with absolute integrity. It's a brilliant book, terrific book. When RT, whom you do reports for from time to time, are or have reported again in the last few days on a story they first broke about 3 years ago. And that is that human rights watch groups in the United States, and this is marvellous, this is a great time, I think, to be a journalist, because we can see the empire is crumbling, bits of the blocks, the building blocks of this crazy empire, the cabal is falling away, because human rights watch groups in Washington, D.C., as you well know, are saying that upwards of 90% of domestic terror plots in the United States are actually invented and are promoted by the FBI. This is incredible, Wayne.
Yeah, I mean, and we got to realize that Human Rights Watch, I used to work with Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International, but that was back in the 90s. I had a lot of respect for both organizations. Unfortunately, George Soros has invested heavily in these organizations now, and I question their neutrality and but you can't argue with the fact, and that may be a low estimate what they say about the number of terrorist attacks. We know, for example, that the FBI has set up Muslim people in plots that where the FBI has provided almost everything but the detonating switch.
Yeah.
Sometimes they even provided that. So yeah, there's a lot of people in this country. I can remember. I think it was 2000 and maybe it was right after 9/11. The FBI set up some Haitian immigrants in Miami and accused them of trying to blow up the Sears Tower. The whole story made no sense. Of course, it made no sense because it was one of these FBI invented operations. So yeah, there's a lot more like that, of course. Because the only way the FBI can continue with its mandate is to have the fear factor continue as well. And as long as you've got a fearful population, you get these agencies can basically push through their agendas.
Do you know what I worry about, Wayne? I worry that even when this information is put in front of people, where they can't ignore it, because of the implications of it, Wayne, because they have to say to themselves, Jesus, we live in a country where those charged with our protection are actually trying to keep us in a state of fear. When people start to consider that, I still think, Wayne, they're still more likely to bury it, to suppress it within them, so that they don't have to deal with it and don't have to face with it.
Yeah. However, what's maybe changing this year, we have it's a presidential election year, and I've never seen it where where there's two candidates of the two different parties, some people would say the two alike parties, who really have irritated the party's infrastructure, the leadership. And you got Donald Trump and the Republicans and Bernie Sanders over in the Democrats, both challenging their own party's leadership. And even the two individuals aren't. Sanders has been what he's called an independent socialist for years, not a Democrat, and Donald Trump has been a Democrat in the past, and now he says he's a Republican. He's of course messed around with libertarianism, but these are the two candidates causing the most heartache with the respective parties. And I think in the case of Trump, he's already made some comments where he doesn't believe the 9/11 Commission report. He's called for the release of the 28 pages. He said, "I can't tell you any more." He said, "But I don't believe there's only one country involved." And he said, "I'd like to tell you about one of the other countries, but I do business with them, and I can't really get into that." Well, we know which country that is.
Of course,
by the way.
yeah.
But even the fact that some of this has crept into the presidential campaign, I think, is also helping to wake people up. even though it's been 15 years since 9/11. It's still, we still live with the effects of it every day.
When we've only got you for another couple of minutes, we've had a load of tweets on this. People can tweet at Richie Allen Show. Wayne's website is waynemadsenreports.com. I recommend it strongly. Just a couple of quick questions, Wayne, and we'll let you get back to it then. Thanks for being with us, my friend. It's been a while. It's always nice to have you on. Sean says, Wayne, is Iran the next target? And is China the ultimate prize for, well, he doesn't go on to say this, but I know he's talking about the cabal. For the central banksters. Is Iran the next target? Are they done with Iran yet?
Well, Iran was supposed to be the next target. I think they bought themselves some time with the nuclear agreement, and they now are slowly getting access to money in the international markets. I do believe, though, if you look at the who these warmongers, these whether you want to call them neocons. And Hillary is actually one of the worst. Ultimately the ultimate targets are Russia and China. And now we see the U.S. military really getting engaged in brinkmanship with the Russians. I mean, we hear about the Russian aircraft that buzzed the American destroyer, but that American destroyer was very near to the large Russian base in Kaliningrad. If that were a Russian destroyer that was as close to Norfolk, Virginia, which is the head of that's the Sinkland Fleet, Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Atlantic Fleet, Norfolk. If it was that close to Norfolk, you can guarantee we'd be sending planes out to buzz the Russian destroyer. So this is kind of ludicrous that the U.S. would be, saying, we were in international waters. We were in provocative international waters. And the same thing with the South China Sea. Chinese maps going back, centuries have showed those islands to be within the Chinese domain. And, the U.S. wants to challenge them on the high seas. So we see these games being played with China and Russia at the same time. There is no way, and I just had some meetings with some Pentagon officials. There's no way the United States could ever survive a two-front conflict, one with Russia and one with China. We would lose. And again, with both our nuclear powers, we might lose very badly.
Yeah.
If it got out of hand. So, people like Ashton Carter, who's basically one of these Pentagon pencil pushers, he's never been in the military. He's making these decisions to confront China and Russia. He has no business being the Secretary of Defense. But we see this with Obama's picks for these offices over and over again. Hillary had no business being Secretary of State. Susan Rice has no business being the National Security Advisor because these people are basically inexperienced adults.
Wayne, I want to thank you for coming on, my friend. I know you're busy. I know you got other engagements today. Folks, go to waynemadsenreports.com. It's terrific reporting. It is intelligent. It is ethical. And it's from somebody who's been on the inside. Wayne, always a pleasure. Thanks for coming on. Look after yourself.
You bet. Thank you.
Bye for now. Wayne Madsen on the line to us there from DC. The new book is Unmasking ISIS, The Shocking Truth. And that book is available at all good online retailers. I think it's very well priced as well. Very well priced. Check it out.